President Trump to unveil his national security strategy in just a few hours from now. The strategy is expected to basically mirror goals outlined by George W. Bush and Barack Obama, but with a sharper focus on China. Nayyera is a former White House senior director and former State Department senior advisor. And Eddie and Brett still with me. Nayyera, let's go to you first. What is the Trump doctrine?
Well, we can certainly expect it to be Trumpian in its double talk, unfortunately. So you have on the surface four pillars that go into detail of the Trump's foreign policy, and that would be, for example, American prosperity. That section talks about trade imbalances with China. We also talks about the border wall and the need for stronger security there. So you have those elements that we've heard him use in campaign speeches. We also, however, have some elements that are considered more traditional foreign policy. For example, upholding rule of law and the value of science and the challenge of education debt. And that's where some of the doublespeak comes in, because those are issues that Donald Trump himself has directly attacked as part of his policies and his way of governing these days. So we can expect this document to be lofty-minded and a good piece of paper. Don't really expect it to translate in light of Donald Trump's personality. And that personality is what foreign leaders will be looking at to see where the country will go and what the United States will do next.
But the doublespeak also applies to China. If he's expected to push back against China's economic ambitions and talk about their economic aggression, how do we not point to the fact that he was just there shaking hands, kissing babies, and the trade deficit has only grown since President Trump's been in office?
Exactly. We also have the challenge with the Middle East and Donald Trump standing and dancing with the Saudi Arabian princes, even though they at the same time are promoting acts of terror elsewhere in the Middle East. So it goes down to Donald Trump's personality and his personal preferences. This is not what the National Security Advisor tried to present a couple of weeks ago as a dramatic rethinking of American foreign policy. It ends up being a hodgepodge of the standard bearers of American foreign policy, rule of law and diplomacy, which unfortunately this president has undermined as an individual.
Undermined it, but does this argument work for President Trump's base? Eddie, to you, he's got the fire and fury rhetoric, but he doesn't actually do anything about it. And from a policy standpoint, it sounds like it's Obama and George Bush's policy.
Yeah, but it's interesting. First of all, he's differentiating himself from Obama because, climate change is not part of his national security strategy, right? Which was an important feature of Obama's NSA report, right? The second thing is that it reminds me of Bannon's three buckets or three pillars, right? We talk about the deconstruction of the administrative state. We talk about economic nationalism, but the third pillar was national security and sovereignty. And so here we see what is often thought of as Bannonism showing up here in this moment. And it looks like it's a hodgepodge, but it's actually consistent, I think, with the confusion that has informed the ideology that shaped the Trump presidency since its beginning.
I would say, show me a national security strategy, and I'm going to show you history laughing in your face. Because George W. Bush came to office promising to do no nation building. His entire presidency was defined by nation building. Barack Obama wanted to turn a chapter on war, wanted to pull back from the Middle East. We ended up fighting ISIS and from Mosul to Raqqa. He was as involved in Middle Eastern policy as all of his predecessors. So I think you have to take any announced strategy with that kind of grain of salt. The real problem here is the connection between national security and sovereignty, because the truth of what we really know about national security and what we should have known from 1945 onwards is that national security is connected to interdependence, to the fact that we cannot simply have a counterterrorism strategy that's an immigration strategy or a wall on our border. We tried that before World War II, and we wound up in a global catastrophe.
Or isn't the thing to focus on that Trump's lies works? If national security plans never actually end up turning into anything, but people hear his rhetoric, where there's no policies to back it up, doesn't that win with Trump's base? President Trump's base, they don't realize that the trade deficit with China has only gotten worse. They think President Trump is getting tough on China. He's not.
Yeah, on the one hand, you're absolutely right, but on the other, there's some real-world consequences to just simply this kind of branding gesture. But think about this. At the moment in which he's putting forward the national security strategy and the moment in which he's isolating China in the way he's doing, there's North Korea. And there's the nuclear threat that North Korea represents. And we need China to help us in that effort. And then we have this.
But this is the heart of the problem, which is that we should be doing everything we can to integrate China economically as we push back against their bad behavior strategically. Looks like we're doing the opposite here.
We're doing the opposite, and they're growing more and more powerful because we don't know how to play the game. All right, thank you all for this conversation. Coming up, Pentagon bracing for more questions after a surprising new report that it spent millions of bucks to investigate UFOs. The revealing details on the secret program still ahead.